Campus Save brings education to colleges about sexual assault and awareness, all that stuff. So, a couple rules. Please be respectful of these guys. They do so much, and they've come out here to talk to us, and it's so great. So please be respectful. Also, hold your questions until the very end. And also, thank you very much to the guest lecture committee for getting Mike Mearls and Jeremy Crawford to come out for a second week to talk about diversity in 5th edition of D&D. Also, really quick, College 101 students, you are only required to be here an hour, but this talk is really good, so I can't imagine you'd want to leave. There's going to be 2 sign-in sheets going around. You only have to sign 1. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Mike Mearls. While Jeremy gets his technical stuff sorted out, but I introduce myself. I am the senior manager for the Dungeons and Dragons R&D team at Wizards of the Coast, and Jeremy and I were co-lead designers on D&D 5th edition. And so, yeah, we're going to talk a bit about the process we went through in creating 5th edition and how we address diversity, some of the tactics and strategies we used, and some of the areas where we can see as we go in the future, we want to work, areas where we still have work to do to really hit the goals that we have set for ourselves for D&D as a whole. And I think Jeremy's going to be double fisting mics, so his voice is just too strong for one.
Yeah, it's like I have 2 ice cream cones. As Mike said, I'm Jeremy Crawford, co-lead designer of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I'm also the managing editor of all products made for the tabletop role-playing game. So Mike, do you want to dive into the intro?
Yeah, sounds right. Also to warn you, normally I would turn my cell phone off. I have my notes here on it, so I might be looking down at it. But my wife is also like 38 weeks pregnant. So if she calls, I will probably be cutting my presence here short, and Jeremy will get to hold both microphones for the entirety of what remains. So hopefully I don't get that call because it would be early and then it's very stressful. So what I wanted to start with was we're going to give you an overview of kind of like what are the challenges we saw and our plans for tackling those challenges, and then our approach both in terms of art and text, and then talk a little bit about some of the reactions we've seen and how that ties into the overall D&D gaming community and the gaming community at large. You know, and so that's basically kind of encapsulates the entire process behind what we've done. So before we get into the details of the actual game, I want to talk a little bit about where this all started. So one of the things to keep in mind is when we're working on a game, as game developers, there's obviously the internet we can use to talk to people. We go to conventions, we follow stuff online. But when it comes to issues concerning diversity, what was interesting is as we got out and started talking to people specifically about this stuff, and Jeremy can talk a little bit about his experiences at Gen Con, we really found it was an issue that was just something people just didn't talk about. That really we didn't get a lot of direct feedback either way, or in the early days of working on 5th edition or prior editions. But when we started kind of pushing, we really found it was this really serious issue for people. And I think that kind of ties into one of the real challenges is that in our culture, if you're in a position of privilege, where being like a straight white guy, I'm kind of the average, these issues just don't come up in my day-to-day life because I don't have to deal with them because of where I am. And a lot of what we learned was it was just being mindful of it. That this wasn't an issue of we had to completely change how we were making the game, or we had to completely radically alter, soup to nuts how we're building D&D. It was just really understanding that there's this layer of an issue that's affecting a really good-sized chunk of our audience that we just can't see because we just don't encounter it on a day-by-day basis. And so for us, it was really just being mindful. We really didn't at any point, and maybe Jeremy can have some other recollections, we didn't really at any point find, what we think the audience really wants this, but we can't do that because diversity or something like that. That never came up. It was more just thinking, well, we know we have a diverse audience. We have, D&D has sort of grown up. Gaming has grown up. It's not just people like me playing games. And just learning to be aware of that, and learning that as we express ourselves through the game, that it's just really about being mindful about the audience and just thinking about the audience as a whole, not just the audience we're familiar with. And that is really, at the end of the day, what happened was there's a lot of assumptions we have baked into our work that we just had to go back and challenge and just work on really pushing against those assumptions and just being mindful about it. And so, Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about some of your experiences in D&D and gaming from your point of view?
Yeah, as Mike said, very early on, I mean, it was almost an assumption for us that we would make 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons as inclusive as possible. And by inclusive, we actually mean a variety of things. We wanted the art and the text to show a wide range of ethnicities. We wanted male and female characters to be represented in close to equal measure. We wanted sexualities other than heterosexuality to appear in our storytelling and in our character creation. We wanted characters with different gender identities to have a presence in our work. But it also goes to the game design itself, because most of those things have to do with representations in art. They have to do with the characters who appear in our stories. It has to do with the type of character you create for yourself. But our entire ethos for 5th edition was one of inclusiveness, even when it comes to gameplay. And so I'll do a brief segue about the design itself, where some of you may know if you followed our 2-year playtest process at all. One of our big goals for this edition was to embrace all that was good about D&D throughout its 40-year history. The game is beloved by tens of thousands of people. It's had many different permutations, not only between one edition to another, but even in each edition there are often different expressions of the game, different ways you might play it in a particular campaign setting, for instance. Dungeons and Dragons has many worlds. Each of those worlds has a different feel. We wanted to make sure our core game was able to have a place for all of those different styles, all of those different play experiences. And so again, this ethos of inclusiveness didn't just have this sort of character and social angle. It had to do with the game mechanics themselves. And even our class design in the game. Each class represents a different style of play, appeals to a different aesthetic. And each one appeals to a different type of player. And when it came to our players, as Mike said, often in the game industry, and you'll see this stated online often, there's this uncontested assumption that the audience for most fantasy and science fiction games is young men, typically in their 20s or 30s. We have found, though, when we look at our data and look at the data for other games, that there is a significant portion of the audience that is female. There is a significant portion of the audience that is queer. There's a significant portion of the audience that is not white. And the composition of the audience aside, we as game designers also want our game, and especially Dungeons and Dragons, which is sort of this cultural institution, we want it to appeal to as many people as possible. So it's not just about appealing to the people we have, but appealing to the people who might become interested in the game. And games, as you all know as students of game design, are often about helping people fulfill various fantasies. Whether those are fantasies of heroism, fantasies of power, fantasies of competence, et cetera, fantasies of romance even. The point is, games are a place where humans of all types can come to explore these things. And so we wanted to make sure that Dungeons and Dragons, as the premier role-playing game, had sort of a landing spot for humans of all sorts. Again, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of your sexual orientation, and again, even regardless of which particular version of D&D you might prefer. Our ideal was give a place for you at the table. Now, Mike referred earlier to experiences I've had in the past related to some of these topics. Over the years, I have been on many panels at Gen Con, PAX, Emerald City Comic Con, and a variety of other smaller conventions, specifically on panels about gay and lesbian gamers and the representation of gay and lesbian characters in games, gay and lesbian creators of games, and so it was clear to me year after year that there was a segment of our audience hungry to have a piece of the game that actually spoke to them, that acknowledged their existence. And for many people, it is as simple as that, not needing a lot of fanfare, not needing a red carpet rolled out and a whole segment of the game made for them, but just to say, yes, we see you, you exist. And that alone is powerful for people. And the power of that can be lost on many of us who are used to being represented, which is especially common in games if you're a white male. We are used to seeing ourselves in games. But if you're a woman, you will often go to a game and not see a character anything like yourself. Or if there is a woman, the woman is an object of straight male desire rather than a fully fledged character. And our goal is, if we have women, they're characters, not objects. If there's a gay person, the character is a full-fledged character and not a stereotype. If we have a person of color, that person has as important of a role in the story as a white person in the story, and so on and so forth. But again, at these panels throughout the years, it's clear again and again, these people are here, these people are playing not only our game, but they're playing everybody's games. There are women, there are people of color, there are gay people, there are trans people playing games of all sorts, whether they're RPGs, board games, or video games.